Hello, welcome to part 2 of using core reflection to unlock your teacher superpowers. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, then I recommend that you stop this video and go watch part 1 because what we're going to talk about in part 2 is going to make a lot more sense if you've had a chance to watch part 1. So in part 1 we talked about the various superpowers that a teacher can have. I called them core qualities, and we all have our strengths, and you might see some qualities on here that resonate with you as possible strengths, and so I would encourage you to continue to become more aware of when you're using those as you're teaching, and that's part of what this process will be about, the core reflection process, that is. This list here is not the full complete list, because the full complete list would probably take up a lot of slides. So I think whatever it is that you feel you're strong in, that's a quality, not necessarily a competency, like saying that you're strong at classroom management. That would be a competency. However, I would imagine if you felt that you were doing well as a manager of a classroom, then probably you're doing things that include your qualities, such as being observant or being present and exercising confidence. I think that these are things that are qualities. Let me backtrack, because I don't know that confidence is a quality as much as it's a feeling, so we'll just put a pin in that, because I will come back to that. But optimism maybe is what I'm thinking instead of confidence. So these are qualities. These are superpowers. This is what we're going to be talking about in this screencast. So last time in part 1, I talked about a reference letter that your cooperating teacher or your principal or someone who supervises you would write about you in the future. And I want you to think about that letter now. They haven't wrote it yet, whoever it is. So I think in part 1 I asked you to reflect on what you'd like to see in that letter. And so far in student teaching, if you're student teaching right now, most of you are. Imagine the folks that are watching this are student teaching. What have you encountered so far that has made it harder for you to make the things that you discussed in your letter actually happen in the classroom? So I talked about my course evals last time, and I said that a student had said that I was patient with them and I was helping them critically think about the content. And so maybe when I was student teaching, I wasn't quite as patient as I needed to be, or I was maybe hindered from helping students think critically about the content. And I would have had some reasons, some obstacles that I would have said, okay, this was something that made it hard for me to be as patient as I would like. Or this is something that made it hard for me to build in as much critical thinking as I would like. And I can think about my own student teaching and kind of feeling like I was constantly being rushed to get through the curriculum. And that made it hard for me to be patient. And so maybe I would put that down as a obstacle. And I think the same thing would apply for helping me help students critically think, is if I feel rushed, then what we're going to talk about in the classroom is going to maybe be superficial and more, if you're talking about Bloom's taxonomy, more on the memorization, remember level, instead of that evaluation and synthesis level that's higher up on Bloom's taxonomy. If you had me for 275, then this stuff should sound familiar, because we talked a lot about Bloom's taxonomy in that class. So I'd like you to pause and reflect on this question. What are the obstacles and opportunities that you've encountered that may have helped you use your qualities? Because there's things that help you use them. And then what are the things that are maybe blocking you from using your qualities? So again, mine were patience and finding ways to be creative and help students think critically. So pause this and reflect on this number 1 here. Okay, so part of what you may have realized is that when you had moments of crisis it was particularly difficult for you to use your core qualities, to use those teacher superpowers. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity here to pause again and to watch this video. So you go into YouTube and search "What Makes a Hero," and perhaps type in TED Ed as well, because this is a sort of spin-off of TED Talks, and it's going to talk about the hero's journey. So when I talk about crisis, I'm talking specifically about this concept within the hero's journey, sort of heuristic or way of interpreting processes or patterns or moments in our lives. So feel free to pause this, go to YouTube, search for "What Makes a Hero," and watch that, because the questions I'm going to pose next are going to be associated with this video. So, or at least the video is going to help you understand the questions a little bit better. So I hope you've watched that video. So these are questions that I want us to think about, and perhaps even pause and write down some answers to these questions. What is a crisis that you've encountered so far in student teaching? And how did this crisis test your ability to use your superpowers? And how did you respond when you encountered this crisis? How do you want to respond in the future when you experience another crisis? So crises, if this is the hero's journey sort of arc or path, then, before student teaching, you were kind of in your status quo student life. And then you began and you started to experience things that were bringing you into the adventure of learning to be a teacher. And then you encounter some things that challenge you, and that's when you finally depart into this special world of being like, oh wow, I'm a teacher and I have this responsibility that comes with being a teacher. And then there's trials and tribulations that come with that. And then at some point it might build up to a crisis. And core reflection can really help student teachers and teachers really understand crises that they encounter and pull out the treasure that they need to be able to respond to future crises. So that treasure is just becoming aware of your core qualities and what they actually look like when you're encountering a crisis, and maybe the things that you tell yourself that might block you. So when I was student teaching, I was always having this voice in my head that's like, you need to go faster, you need to go faster. No dead air, and so that really made it hard for me to build in critical thinking, and made it hard for me to be creative enough to build in critical thinking into my lessons. And it made it hard for me to be patient when students posed questions that were maybe a little different from what I had planned. And so these are things that when I reflect on my student teaching, I'm thinking in terms of core reflection right now. I'm thinking of the qualities, and I'm thinking of what were the obstacles that I encountered, and what did I feel when I encountered those obstacles. And that's the next sort of level of core reflection. Is it's not just what you do in the classroom, it's how it makes you feel, because usually as teachers, I would say almost always as teachers, we have emotions that we associate with certain actions that we take in the classroom. So when we're using our core qualities, when I was being patient, or when I am being patient as a teacher, I feel different things than when I feel rushed. When I feel rushed, I don't really feel like I'm being the teacher I want to be, and my emotions are anxiety and sometimes anger, because I want to go faster and things are blocking me, and I'm not really getting in touch with my core qualities anymore. So frustration can happen, and your actions as a teacher get colored by those feelings. And so part of what we're hoping happens when you use core reflection is that you become aware of the feelings and the thoughts that you have. So I was thinking, oh, I have to go faster, and then that's making me feel anxious. And then what ends up happening, my actions aren't in sort of alignment with what I want, because I want to be a patient teacher. I want to be a teacher that helps students think critically. But it's sort of in sort of tension with how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking in that moment. And then my actions aren't the best kind of actions that that a teacher needs to have to get the most out of students and to help students get the most out of the learning opportunities that they encounter in your classroom. So I'll invite you to pause again, and I want you to think about, like, go back and reflect on those crisis moments. What were you thinking in those moments? What were you feeling? Like, what emotions did you have? And what did you want to have happen? Because, again, when I felt rushed, I wasn't really, what I wanted to have happen was not happening. And I was feeling rushed because my thoughts were like, I got to go faster, I got to do this better. And you can see how those sort of thoughts, feelings, and what I want were all kind of misaligned. And my teaching was not as good as it could have been in that moment. So pause and think about your crisis moments if you've had them. If you haven't had anything you would say rises to the level of crisis, then maybe just moments that you felt maybe didn't go as well as you hoped they would go. And think about what were you thinking, what were you feeling, and what did you want to have happen in those sort of moments where you felt like it wasn't going very well. So I hope you paused it and thought about that question I just posed. Those thoughts that you maybe were having were, you could call them limiting beliefs. So the belief that I had where I was like, I have to go faster, like this is a belief that's limiting my ability to use my core qualities of being patient and creative and inviting that creative thinking that I so value in as a teacher and as somebody who's been a student too, because I love teachers that design activities that really work well in inviting critical thinking. So what I'd like you to do is another sort of opportunity to talk with someone else. And if there's no one nearby, then certainly you can maybe take a screenshot or take your camera on your phone and take a picture of it and talk with someone. And so you have the person A, which would perhaps be you, and you would talk about an inspiring thing. So we want to flip the script here a little bit and think about something that went really well as you were student teaching. And describe the thoughts and feelings that you're having when that happens. And the person who's listening to you, they want to point out any strengths that they hear, any core qualities, these superpowers that they hear as you're talking about this inspiring moment. And then after you talk about that, then I want you to then, after you've really felt it, so feel the inspiration that you had in that moment and feel the feelings, the emotions that you had, and really remember the thoughts that you had as that was happening. So after you've felt that, after that person B has said, you know what, I think you're being very patient in that moment, or I think that you're being very creative or optimistic, or very passionate, or being very funny, like that's a quality. And after you've done that, then I want you to talk some more, and this time talk about what blocked you from using the qualities that person B just pointed out to you. So if they did say you're being passionate and creative and patient, then then that person B will go, well, it blocked those core qualities from coming out in the crisis that you talked about a minute or two ago when I was on a previous slide. And that will kind of maybe help you see the juxtaposition between your qualities and that limiting belief, and see how, these are two things that you encounter sometimes as you're teaching. And this is really what core reflection is all about. There will be a part 3, the last part, where I just talk you through the steps of core reflection. But I've kind of done the steps already. I just haven't formalized it and put it on a worksheet that you can then print off and work on. And that will be something that I'll give you in part 3. In the meantime, I want you to continue to identify your core qualities and continue to use those, and also identify the core qualities of your students. And then think about what you want to do next time you encounter that limiting belief that maybe blocks you from using your core qualities. Best of luck with your student teaching and in your teaching, and I look forward to making that part 3 so that you can watch and learn from that.